surgeon inventors and founders get stuck all the time. They've got great ideas, solid IP, maybe even some early prototypes, but they hit a wall trying to engage strategics. But when you have a real innovation quarterback, someone who's actually gotten early stage deals done with strategics, it's an absolute game changer. That's why I sat down with Brad Shirley for this week's pod. He's back for round 2. Brad's the founder of DCMS Solutions and just helped a client land an IP asset acquisition with Arthrex from first serious conversation to a signed deal in about 7 months, which is light speed. Brad spent 20 years in medtech development, taking over a dozen technologies to market. Now he's helping early stage innovators do what most can't, right? Advance the product, generate traction, and actually close deals with strategics that are good for the founder, good for the team. So if you're a founder wondering how to get from interesting idea or cool prototype to term sheet, this one's for you. You're going to learn what you actually need to get a deal done and the 6 areas you need to audit before approaching strategics, the go slow to speed up principle, and how spending an extra 90 days on prep saved months in negotiations for Brad and his team. What actually gets you past the first meeting. It's not your pitch deck, it's your traction story and how to craft that, and how to find the right person at the strategic, what you should say when you get there, and what intel and research to collect on the strategic before you even have that first conversation. So one of my favorite moments, Brad's client was about to quit before they started working together, and then less than 2 years after they started working together, Arthrex bought all of the IP from this physician, surgeon, inventor. So you don't want to miss this episode, chock full of not just strategy, but the tactics that Brad used to have this result and make it a reality. So stick around for the whole thing. I know you're going to love it. Mr. Brad Shirley, welcome back to the pod. Last time we talked, you were helping companies navigate R&D challenges and product development. I assume you're still doing that. And we're going to talk about the fact that you're still doing that. But like, how you been, man? What's been keeping you busy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back for a second time. Am I actually the first second time?
I think you are the first repeat podcast. There may have been one other, but I actually think you are the first repeat.
I think that still deserves a plaque or something. So
it does. It's in the mail. Just check your mail.
All right, good. No, it's been great. Still doing the same thing. I think when we first talked, I was building a business to help medtech innovators do exciting things, and still going at it and having some really great success, and excited to catch up with it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah, and just FYI, the power of internet friends, I'll say. I think we met through XO stuff. Just like I want to say you joined the community, or we'd reached out to you about the community or something to that effect. But just the power of like meeting cool people on the internet is like very powerful. So
it is.
Without further ado, I'd been like bugging you about this a lot just because I loved like keeping tabs on it and hearing about how things were going. But I would love to kind of give you the floor a little bit. There was a client that you've been working with, right? That you helped through a series of fortunate events and hard work and things, were able to land a deal with Arthrex. So tell us about like what you can about kind of the company, the client, the deal, like maybe just like a 30,000 foot view, and then like we'll get into more of the specifics.
Sure. So yeah, the client was actually one of my first clients with DCMS. So eternally grateful for that, just on a personal note. So this was Dr. Wendell Holmes out of Columbia, South Carolina, long history as a sports med surgeon. And I linked up with him in the spring of 2024. That sounds like a really long time ago, but it isn't that far. Spring of 2024, through I think some of my friends on LinkedIn knew what I was doing, and then utilizing some Clemson alumni connections, we got linked up. And it was really great. So he had a really interesting, differentiated sports med tech. He had some foundational IP from all the way back in 2011. Had some early prototypes that were really interesting. He also had a couple really good advisors. So he started to build a little bit of a team around him, but he had stalled. And so I found out later that he was really about to quit until we came on and just started to bring this back to life. But he had been having conversations with several strategics over the years, and he just wasn't getting traction. He was getting the dreaded, "This is really interesting, Dr. Holmes. Keep us posted. Come back to us in 3 months." We all know those reactions and what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're very nice to him because he's Dr. Holmes, he's a customer, and it really was a great idea. But I think what he was missing at that point, there was no development roadmap. There was no sort of idea as to where to go next beyond let's just keep iterating on the prototype until we
Yeah.
get something that's really exciting and sexy that someone's going to want to bite on. And I think ultimately, to sum it all up, I think his risk profile was probably just a little bit too high at that point to do any sort of
Yeah.
again, really good idea, interesting, wasn't developed enough to really get the traction you want.
Yeah. And, you see that. I've seen that. You've seen that, I'm sure, plenty of times. Getting stuck phase with, especially with like physician surgeon innovators where like they can fund things for a while but then they get stuck. And like, honestly, and this isn't just like casting aspersions on any groups, but like sometimes it's just the group that you're working with is not a good fit. Like, and if there's not good, I'm going to call it product ownership, product quarterback, kind of your innovation quarterback that's moving things along. Like engineers, they love to do engineering and they love to tinker and iterate and prototype. And it's also how they get paid consequentially. So like things can kind of languish in that like iterative loop way too long. And with no one to really drive it forward, like you said, put that development roadmap together, really start executing on it. Like it's tragic, but like replete throughout, clinical innovation. So kind of next question on that, like walk us through, the starting point. So like they came to you, they were at this stuck point. They had some structure. You said it was a little bit early in the risk profile was like, too early or whatever. But like, how did you guys identify Arthrex as like the right strategic partner? Were there other potential partners in the mix? Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want to get in front of the strategics, but that idea does not get them in front of them, right? Like a lot of people I'm sure would love to hear how you kind of strategically and tactically thought about the approach and executed to like get in front of them with the right message at the right time.
Yeah, so that's a big loaded question. We could talk for hours on that one. But yeah, so I think ultimately, I mean, just to back up maybe a half step, I think what we realized even in those first couple conversations, I had just come from a sports med startup. So that market and technology was fresh for me. I think right off the bat, so Dr. Holmes knew he had something very interesting. And it only took a couple conversations for me to go, okay, this is going to be interesting to strategics who have product portfolios in this space. So I think that was the ultimate first step.
Was there a specific, not mechanically speaking, but was there a specific thing about it that you thought made it interesting to someone that had the product in that portfolio, like the ability to treat new patients or more patients or do something they couldn't before? I'm curious.
Yes, it was a new, more efficient way to do a procedure that is commonly done every day that simply isn't good enough. And it was differentiated enough, but not too differentiated to where your surgeon users couldn't understand it or would have to train too much for it. It was simply elegant, as I like to call it. It's very easy to understand, but there were just what he did was come up with a really slick mechanical way to do a very sort of interesting take on a mechanical structure.
So procedure had room for improvement. This way allows you to do it more with better outcomes, but also quicker, more efficiently. Maybe you're taking out steps or loops or ties or knots or something. And it was differentiated enough that kind of like the double-edged sword of like that they can market on it, but not so differentiated that it will take a bunch of training. So it kind of, anyways, I just wanted for people to I think it's important for people to understand like what gets those strategics decided. But anyway, so you knew that you had something that was going to get them excited. Keep going.
Yeah. So, I mean, from step one, so we didn't, one of my first questions I always ask when I'm talking to potential clients or innovators is, what do you want to do? Do you want to go license this? Do you want to build a company? And, you always don't get a clear answer to that question, but, I always like to ask it. He was really okay with either path. He really didn't understand that building a company was a pathway, but what I could see with the team he had pulled together that, if you really want to see this through, that is an option. We can build this and we can take this through a 510K approval. So that was sort of the first overall step. And then we really took a step back. I'm like, look, we're not going to go talk to any strategics or any investors for a little while. We need to tighten this up. We need to build this story. We need to elevate your prototypes. We need to do.
Can you say that louder for more people? Like, so I just feel like, no, like it's usually the answer of like, hey, you're not quite ready. We need to do hard work before we're getting in front of investors and strategics. Sorry, I'm like interrupting you too much. But
No, that's fine. So, I mean, basically, here's the play I ran, and I've since sort of formalized this or productized it a little bit, but essentially what I did is what I call a productization audit and a strategic development roadmap. I looked at his kind of 6 key areas: technology readiness, product market fit. That's a big chunk of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Reg strategy, reimbursement and health economics, IP, manufacturing readiness, and then finally fundraising prep. So what have you got in all of those categories? And then, I kind of call that an audit. And what that spits out is a strategic development roadmap that aligns with whatever answer you gave me to that first question. Do you want to license it, or do you want to go to a strategic? And a lot of those things are similar, whatever you do from a roadmap perspective, but there are some sort of tweaks that you want to do depending on which way is your preference. And so I had a big roadmap, and what I did is said, he had been at this for a while, so let's focus on just the next 90 days. We're not going to go talk to any strategics, and we're going to start building these things. And so we found really good vendors that could help us elevate the components of the device. We essentially found a supply chain to build devices. We were able to we ended up testing like 200 to 300 devices over the course of a year. So we were able to make dozens of these things instead of just 1 or 2. A strategic is going to understand what the regulatory pathway is, what the reimbursement looks like. We still did that work to make sure we had the foundational understanding, especially if we had to go the investor route or go the 510K route or path. So we still did all that ourselves. IP, so we get foundational IP, but once we nailed down kind of that final tweak design, we filed one final patent that covered right on the nose the design that he had. We did some very capital efficient freedom to operate work. We didn't have 25, 30K to go spend on a big IP analysis, but we did find, I had a boutique law firm I will call them in my network that helped us scope it down. Like, here's 5 companies we want you to look at their IP. We scoped them and narrowed their search, so we really kept that at a reasonable cost. And so we spent, we did that in 2 90-day chunks, so really kind of a 6-month period, elevated all of those functional areas, and then we went back and started talking to strategics, started talking to organizations that could potentially provide some grant funding and help us with fundraising. And so that was kind of the baseline of what we did. So we didn't go right off the bat. No, that wasn't an interesting. The discussion is like, hey, we're not going to go talk. I know you've talked to these 4 people. We're going to put them on the back burner for a minute, and we're going to build and elevate your story, and then we're going to go back. So that was really our first 6 months of the HolmesMed story, I'd say.
That's really awesome. I mean, like, just the lesson there, I think, for people, sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And I think the focus on, the product and testing it, and not just iterating for the sake of iteration, but like, let's make it, let's test it, let's define what user needs were not met. Do we need to add any new ones? And then we do it again, right? And then you do it again, and kind of iteration for a very specific purpose with very specific defined outcomes, and doing that quickly, because like all the other stuff, honestly, when you're that early, is noise. You know what I mean? And until you've got all that stuff, right, as well as like the FTO and the development roadmap and like, those fundamental things, like there's just a lot of riffraff that people get caught up in, like trying to focus on oh, well, we're ready. Well, you're not ready at all. But like that, like slow down to speed up and getting, another, people call this like investable, right? Like, and I know you guys, I think we're raising money and stuff like that, but like ultimately investable and acquirable are like, sisters, similar. Cousins, whatever, right? Another thing I think a lot of people would be interested in. So like you kind of described a lot of the preparation, right? And we'll say kind of leading up to like the very first meeting, and we'll talk about kind of the initial outreach more on like a sheer physics of how you got in front of them, like who'd you ask to get in front of them, blah, blah, blah. But like on like the asset preparation, like how long did that take? I think you mentioned that, but like were there specific assets? Were there data packages? Was Was it a Excel model of some sort? Was it just a really refined deck? Like, what was that initial send and then initial meeting? Like, what assets and stuff did it kind of like revolve around in your mind? Other prototype, of course, right?
Yeah, we knew when we reached back out that we didn't want to come back with an email or a phone call that just insinuated that this is just Dr. Holmes again, a doctor with an idea. And so, from a package standpoint, I mean, we had all these things. And very simple things. We developed the HolmesMed Google Drive. I mean, we acted like a real company.
Yeah.
So we had all of this information, but I think when we all those things that I outlined, sure, but we were able to reach out. We were able to plant those seeds that, hey, this isn't just Doc Holmes with an idea and IP and some drawings. Hey, by the way, since we last talked, we've tested 100 devices and we found some really interesting mechanical data. We've made some, we've filed two more patents. When we were able to reach back out, it was able to show traction and also in areas that I know that if I sat at a table with them, they were going to ask me questions about that anyway. So we're able to really show significant traction and meat behind what we were doing. Yeah. So with most of the strategic outreach, I mean, it was simple. These connections, I mean, using your warm introductions are outstanding. I mean, that's a great way to get in.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, before we get on to like that part, I just wanted to like maybe like draw a box around some of the stuff that you said to focus on it. Like, the traction, right? That was the thing, right? You wanted to communicate traction. There was company maturity, right? We've turned this into an enterprise, not just a surgeon with an idea. Testing, right? We've tested 120, 200 of these, right? So that means you're building and you're testing and you're evaluating and you're iterating. We've, found some interesting, got some interesting mechanical data. So like these weren't just, let's see if it works, but like you're capturing data. And I think there was even some like cadaver lab stuff that you guys had done, right? Like at that point in time. So it was all, FTO, new patent filed. So it was all of these things that speak to the product, the enterprise, the IP, our freedom to operate. We have moved the ball up the court with all of these things. And like, that was the focus of that, initial like kind of reintroduction, right? Yeah. Which I think is important for everybody. You don't have to wow them with like all of this stuff. You just need to communicate the most critical pieces of traction and how you've moved things forward. And I think those are good areas to focus on. So getting back into it.
A point on that, I think, and yet all those things culminated in an updated pitch deck. Don't start with the pitch deck. The pitch deck is at the end. So it made that process really easy to pull together all those things we had done. I mean, it just made everything easier for us to build that package and elevate in all of those areas. And traction started to show. Our conversations changed. Our emails were returned quicker. Once people saw we were moving, all that was really positive.
Yeah, and I'm sure part of that, I think more people need to think this way, and I know for a fact that this is kind of like part of that audit and development roadmap that gets created based on the strategy, license versus acquisition or whatever. But like, I think a lot of people, especially like if they are either open to or exclusively pursuing like an early type of license, which is very hard to do, right? Part of a huge part of your focus should be like, what are the milestones and validation steps with this device that I can do that show traction that they will care about, right? And I think you just laid out all of those proof points. Yeah. But like for a license, you want to know it works, it's been tested, you want to see data, you want to see the patent, the FTO, like all of that stuff is just like right in line with the strategy of like, we're going after an early deal, early license, something like that, or early acquisition or something like that. So anyway, I just wanted I think a lot of people will say like, what do I need to do? And they'll focus on like, oh, I need to go do all this commercial focused stuff. And I need to like, maybe even talk to distributors. And it's like, you can talk to them, but like, what are they going to care about? They're going to care about that product-based traction at the end of the day if you're going for something early like that. So anyways, so keep going on like the initial outreach stuff on like, and get as tactical as you can. Like, we use this person's warm connection. This is their profile or persona. And then they took us to this person. Like I know people want to know this stuff.
Yeah. Well, just, one final comment on the other thing. The other thing that I didn't realize is it gave confidence to people we were talking to, but it also gave confidence to the HolmesMed team. When we went through and accomplished all those things, all of a sudden Dr. Holmes is like, okay, I see it. This is really exciting. Yep. So it's kind of two sides of the coin there.
Yeah, yeah,
So reaching out, I'm going to get into too much detail on the Arthrex side, but I mean,
yeah,
that was a warm introduction. We didn't go to them initially, but that was partly me. I knew they are the number one player, right? So
yeah,
I really wanted a nice tight story and package. And like, we might only get really one shot to go after this. I know we've got some warm intros. Honestly, I think the dynamic between me and Dr. Holmes worked out well there because I was kind of holding him off. And then finally he's like, okay. It was probably about 9 months in or so. He's like, I'm ready. I'm like, okay, I really can't hold him back anymore. So here we go. But
yeah,
I mean, I think the most important part is when we got that warm introduction and outreach, the email that we could send. I think I've already mentioned it. It had some meat behind it, right? Because we had done that work, and I think very early on in the first, I mean, even the first conversation, the idea that this was more advanced than maybe typical ideas that maybe
yeah,
come into their house was extremely clear from the start. It was okay. You got mechanical
yeah,
testing. We want to see it. So we had all those pieces, and we didn't have answers to every question, but we had answers to a lot of questions, and that just helped us get to the next meeting and to the next lab, and just help made
yeah,
it easy for not just Arthur, but for any strategic we talk to say yes to the next step with
yeah. No, I think that.
all that foundational work.
Yeah, I forget what movie it is. Maybe it's like The Patriot or something where it's like until you see the whites of their eyes and like holding the dry powder and like honestly getting a shot on goal with like maybe your number 2 or number 3 target, right? And like refining that before you go to the number 1. I think that's really awesome and a good story. So it was like warm intro at the right time. You leveraged a warm intro. Did you, and you don't have to say the specific title, but like, you could try to go to a C-suite. You could try to go to like a biz dev or corporate biz dev. You could try to go to engineering or R&D. Like, where did you guys kind of focus first on like those initial, and then like, how did it plinko from there as the meetings progressed, if you can say?
Yeah, so I mean, with any of the strategics, I went through people I knew because I had a personal
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and it might have been a degree or two off, right? It might have been a sort of Kevin Bacon type deal, but
Yeah.
finding the right person that at least would know me and open the door was
Yeah.
critical.
Huge.
That happened with a couple that could get me to the right person. We didn't really have any just randomly. I found this guy on LinkedIn with a BD title and I reached out to him. We didn't, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that as long as your approach is proper. But we didn't have to do that. We had enough connections in the space, and the Arthrex specifically, it was very clear. They're like, this is the guy you need to speak to. So
Yeah.
um, and we went straight to the source, and we went right to the person that we needed to get traction and momentum and everything.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Did you find, last question about this? I feel like this is like a key part, but like, obviously once you get in the door, right, they're going to put you in their own workflow of like, this person is whatever. But like, after that initial meeting, get you in the door, whatever, like, did you find yourself like in those second and third meetings, was it more of an engineering or sales or biz dev? Was it like big group calls with a bunch of people? I'm just curious. And I know every organization does it differently. It's just curious.
Yeah, almost all of our interactions early on, it's technical engineering and product management led.
Yeah.
Those were our entryways for any strategic we spoke to, and even if we went through a couple, we went our initial contacts. It was business development, but they very quickly to do that initial screening, it went into a product management or R&D segment to start.
Yeah, not surprising on that. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing the first conversation didn't result in a term sheet, of course. So walk us through, and like you don't have to give us like a readout on every meeting, but like kind of just like what were the key inflection points of like well, we first dove into the technical and looked at data first, and then we went. The next kind of focus was this, and then the next inflection point was this.
Yeah, I think, in general, it was largely here's what we have and answering questions related to it. The early discussions are always, what do you have? One of the first questions is always, do you have IP protection behind this design?
Yeah, yeah,
So that won't be surprised to anybody who's listening to this, but you've got to have that locked down early on because that's going to be one of the
yeah,
first questions. But I think in general, it's here's what we got, here's what we've done. And then there's some level of benchtop testing to show that it works, demonstrations, if you will. In this specific space, what happened after that, it almost always you move straight to a cadaver lab. So
Yeah.
get it into a cadaver lab so that everyone could get their hands on it. In some cases, surgeon advisors from various strategics would, they bring in surgeon advisors, or surgeons on staff would come in. Dr. Holmes would show them how it works.
Yeah.
And then those advisors would do it themselves. So the device had to be strong enough to not just work in Dr. Holmes' hands. It had to work in others' hands too. That's a really nerve-wracking part of development. That kind of the first time you hand your baby off to another very expensive, or not expensive,
Jesus take the wheel moment.
Experienced surgeon, and let them go. But yeah, so typically it went from sort of benchtop demonstration, asking the core questions, and then moving to cadaver lab studies. And at some point, I think one of the really interesting things, something to focus on at a small team and advantage, there were at least 2 instances where after cadaver labs, we could tell there was interest. Like, this is really, really interesting. It would be really great if it did this. And in 2 instances, we were able to go back and in 2 or 3 weeks come back and say, hey, it now does this. Speed and flexibility is an advantage of startups, and take advantage of it, because you just can't move at that speed in a corporate environment. So
yeah,
those were really 2 big learnings and advantages that we had that ultimately helped us, I think, secure a deal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like speed and flexibility. I mean, it sounds like the cadaver lab, at least the initial one, there's probably another one right after when you came back and said, I wish you could do this, but like, it sounds like that the bench and cadaver lab and that progression was like a big deal. You know what I mean? And one of the biggest inflection points. So I think for the people listening, like, you need to be thinking about not just like, does this work on the bench, but does it work in the cadaver lab? But even further, like, does this work well enough that I can hand it to someone that's like not going to use the brittle approach that I might think it needs to not break it, like, right? Making it durable, even at that early stage, right? It sounds like it was like really critical. So,
these devices were put through the ringer. I mean, this is someone evaluating your tech to see if they want to bring it in house. I mean, you were putting together soft tissue constructs and pulling way harder on constructs than you would ever do, but everyone's trying to get a feel for what your device can do.
Yeah. So I think we alluded to some of these, but like stopping at that point before we talk about any negotiations or deal structure, anything like that, which I know we can't say too much, but like, what are the biggest mistakes that you see companies make, like when trying to kind of get to that point of like, maybe we're past 2 cadaver labs and they're like seriously looking at this, thinking about what type of deal they want to do, like to get to that point, like what, another way to say that, maybe like what would have killed this deal if you hadn't done or caught it? Like, what are the biggest mistakes you see?
Biggest mistakes. I don't know. Maybe I'll go a step earlier. I think IP to license deal doesn't happen anymore. It might have happened 20 to 30 years ago. So, I mean, if Dr. Holmes would have stayed in that state that he would still be sitting there because, we didn't elevate it where we needed to. What could have killed the deal? I think you have to have an extreme amount of patience during these things. In our world, things move relatively fast. It felt really slow.
They're a private company, right? So they're probably moving faster than a lot of publicly traded companies.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, you have to imagine, like, in our HolmesMed world, this is everything we had to do. This was our entirety of focus, right? It was everything. There were no big, annual Christmas parties to go to or quality trainings to go to. There were none of those things that you get in a big corporate environment in there. I mean, this was our sole focus. So people can't move quite as fast as we can. So I think patience was important. It can be frustrating, but you have to let things kind of marinate and cook a little bit. What could have killed it? I think, a couple of those times when, it'd be nice if it did this. You really need to be able to address that. I mean, if we had not done that a couple of times, things might have stalled. So we were able to show progress there. Those are probably the 2 biggest things that come to mind.
Yeah.
And it's just being a normal human. These are normal people on the other side. Yes. I mean,
yeah,
you're trying to go strike a deal and, you want to see your technology advanced and move forward. But, just recognize that the people on the other side of the table have their priorities and their things that are going on. And, you just have to work your way through it and be humans to other humans, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's a good lesson. I mean, they multi-billion-dollar company, like you said, like this is just their like Tuesday 2:00 meeting,
Yes.
right? Like they're
Yes.
looking at 50 opportunities. They're doing this with a lot of other companies. So you have to be patient. You have to understand that. But I think the other side of that, like you said, is for them to move forward. I think with any company or product, if it clears the bar of this is technically, clinically interesting, they have to like doing business with you. They have to believe that like if they keep this moving forward and we get to negotiations, that you're not going to be a pain in the ass to them to work with, negotiate with. You're going to be reasonable. Like you're going to be able to move this efficiently, you know? So I think like that, like being a good human to other humans and being someone that they want to work with, right, is a big deal.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just one more thing on that. I think, you said mistakes. Know who you're talking to, understand their product portfolio and where your product might fit in there. Just reaching up and emailing and saying, hey, are you interested? You should really know about the target that you're going after. You should know how your technology fits within what they've got. Maybe you even go a step further. One of the things I've learned after this that I'm gonna do more is look at their intellectual property in this space. Do they have something expiring? Do they have their own IP that might be competing in this space? So just understanding who you're talking to, it's good for business and what you're trying to do. It's also just a sign of respect to understand.
Yeah.
You're walking into somebody's living room. You should understand who you're talking to and where your product might fit within their overall scheme.
Yeah, that's crazy important. Like just to double tap that. It's crazy important. So without going into anything confidential or anything like on the deal structure or whatever, like I do want to hear like kind of whatever you can share about it. But I think like more broadly, honestly, one of the things I'm interested in is like, there is obviously like that point of like, hey, like we have something interesting. We think this would be a good fit for you guys. Use the warm intro, get it in front of them, whatever. But like, obviously, there's going to be a point in time where they, and I guess this is a question like, what at a certain point in time was it? Here's what we want, or were they like, what do you guys want, right? Like, kind of, how did the deal structure? Not like about the deal, but like, how did the point come to be and initiation of the deal conversation? Like how did that go just functionally and like how it flowed?
Yeah, I think, maybe a half step back. Our general message was, once we had built everything to where we felt comfortable and confident in what we had, it was, and we had also talked to some investors. So we had some traction, we had some grant money that came in. We had some soft commitments for investment to raise around to go get 510K clearance. Our message was we would rather partner with a strategic, but we are at an inflection point. Dr. Holmes and HolmesMed, we've been at this for a long time. We have the team and the expertise and all the components here to take this through 510K. We don't necessarily want to do that, but we will.
Yeah.
And so that was, again, that's not like a shakedown. So don't take it as like it was kind of a ultimatum. It was just, this is the reality of where we're at. And I think because people should see what we had done and seeing the team that we had together, that put a little bit of urgency into the discussions. Like they knew that we could go get 510K on this if we wanted to.
Yeah.
We were completely clear-eyed. Yeah, we could and we will. Dr. Holmes was really motivated to take this to market. We knew we had something that was really interesting. It's just a really difficult road in almost any med device segment, but especially in the sports med segment. Yeah, you can get to 510K, but then all of a sudden the question becomes, how much can you sell? And then you've got to go finding distributors to go fight against all of these 4 or 5 people that you're trying to make a deal with anyway. So I think that was our general message to anyone we spoke to. Once we felt comfortable with everything we had pulled together, it kind of put a little bit of a timing to it. Like, we're very interested in finding something that works for both parties where we don't have to go that route, but we will if we have to.
Yeah.
So that seemed to really work with multiple parties that we actually spoke to.
Yeah, maybe like the unspoken element of that, but like when you're like, hey, we could go do this, but like this is kind of one of the last off-ramp points where we can, partner with a strategic like you, and that's what we prefer to do. Like, and you really don't even have to say that much more, because if you're in that mode and then there's option A and option B is partner with them, like they've got a good idea if it's probably either just going to be license or acquisition, and then you almost like, it sounded like you guys were almost like, we'll figure out what that partnership looks like, but we No,
Yes.
we want to work with you, and let's address all of the stuff that we have to get to previously and get past until, and then we'll talk about like what a deal looks like. So it sounds like you kind of,
Yeah.
there wasn't really much impetus to like, hey, we want to partner with you, and here's the structure. This is what, here's 4 options that we'll take. It was way more of like, hey, we want to partner. Let's just work the process. We'll worry about this, whatever deal structure later.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, we would talk casually about, we were open to co-development arrangements. I'm really big on those. Strategics are not for some reason. I haven't figured out why, but every group is different, right? There were certain strategics that we talked to that might have made sense for our technology to fit in a certain segment, maybe just foot and ankle, or
Yeah.
maybe just shoulder or something. Well, obviously Arthrex can do everything. So that's
Yeah.
why they are number one and why they were our preferred partner. So we were open to anything. The biggest thing for us is Dr. Holmes wanted to stop spending money. I mean, that is the
Yeah.
reality of it. He had spent a lot of money and made a lot of progress. And so that's why we hit that inflection point. He's like, look, let's find a deal or go get some external investment. That's really where we're at. And it was completely fair. He put in a significant amount of his own funds to get there. And that was just the
Yeah.
reality of where we are
Yeah.
at that point.
And can you say, like, I know you've kind of alluded to like you were open to co-development, you were open to acquisition, like highest level of like what the deal looked like at all?
It was,
Asset,
I
IP license.
yeah, it was,
Yeah.
it was an IP and asset acquisition. So ultimately, I think the biggest thing, it was a win-win for everyone. We're
Yeah.
happy. I
No, I
hope they're
mean, sounds
happy.
like it.
I hope they do great things with the product. I think that benefits everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, okay, kind of shifting gears, kind of broader strategic implications, that kind of stuff. But like, there's clearly a point, right? You guys hit that inflection point of like, do we keep going and try to get more VC funding, or do we do a strategic partnership, right? Like you laid out this scenario of like surgeon, founder, inventor, some outside capital raised. He's put a lot of his own money into it though. And like at that jump off point, which is like I think a lot of groups get through that pre-seed plus a lot of founder investment. And then they get to this point. But like, are there, specific companies or types of products or whatever where you really believe that like a co-development or, trying to pursue like some deal like this, like makes more sense? And it could be like the market, like you said, and if it's dominated by a single few. You see what I'm trying to say? Like, when should companies and like their products like look at it and say like, I really need to pursue, at least explore this path versus just their traditional, do the VC raising, take it to market, do my own sales and commercial?
Yeah, really good question. I think in this case, you were looking at 1 to 1.5 million sort of pathway to a very clear regulatory pathway, to a class 2
Yeah.
510K pathway with very obvious predicates. That lends itself to be able to be creative, to find maybe some exits earlier. I think if you're talking about a more complicated device that maybe, a more complicated class 2 or class 3 device that's going to take you several years and several million to get there, that
Yeah.
makes this path a little bit harder, because I haven't seen strategics have an appetite for taking something on that early. They want to see more traction, which costs more money. So I think this one really hit kind of the sweet spot of,
Yeah.
yes, it took money. Dr. Holmes would tell you it's not insignificant, the amount of money he spent, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a little bit more reasonable. The pathway was clear, and we were able to provide a device. The way I like to frame it is, there's a lot of times we combine R&D, but really that's two separate things. There's research and then there's development. I don't feel like strategics want to take in a lot of research projects,
Yeah.
because there is no clear answer in a research project. You've got to take that in, give it to your research team, have them research, have them tinker, have them try to find a solution, even if
Yeah.
something's
Yeah.
really interesting from an IP or tech perspective. But if they can plug it into a development team, which is what we had,
Yeah.
plug it into a development team with a prototype that was elevated. We show we can make 200 to 300 of these things, and we had the testing and everything behind it. That's a different story.
Yeah.
That's a, hey, you have the resources from a development perspective to do this better than we can. We've done kind of the hard research part up front and got it to
Yeah.
what I'd call a design free standpoint. That's kind of an inflection point for me.
Yeah, and I would almost say like you guys did almost all of the research and development, and you kind of gave them something that was like ready for DFM. Really, it almost feels like that because like
Yeah.
you guys
Yeah.
tested it. They said, "Hey, can it go do that? I wish it could do X, Y, and Z." You guys made it do X, Y, and Z. Tested it, still worked very robustly. Then it's like I feel like the development from there is almost like in my mind like so minute and like it's almost more like okay like what are we gonna do on DFM? What are our SKUs and size? You know what I'm saying? Like those types of
Yep.
I guess still development, right? Design and development considerations, but
Yeah.
like yeah, I guess the other way to say that too is like you removed virtually all the technical risk out of the development process. So there's still
Lower the
development to be
risk.
done,
Yes.
maybe, but it's back to the question, like what kind of what I was hearing you say is like, and I agree with this, but like if there's a commodity on one end of the spectrum and then there's like class 3 PMA on the other end of the spectrum, right? And there's a complete mix and bands in between. When you have something that has that like clear of a 510K and there's clear predicates, like that's going to lend itself to there being maybe like more devices like it in the market. So like I use the term commodity, maybe that's not the right term, but you see what I'm saying, right? Where there's other types of that out there. And typically when there's a developed market like that, there are like clear market leaders, usually like an oligopoly of like these four companies control 80% or 75%. And I think all of those things, right, kind of make up this framework of like, in this case, like you really should explore and frankly pursue a early strategic partnership or license or asset IP sale, those types of things. Because like, again, it's not that you couldn't go get FDA clearance. That's not the hard part with stuff where you've got a clear predicate and a clear path, right? Like people, I feel like a lot of founders, and this was probably me at one point, thought, well, if we just get to FDA clearance, then Moses will part the Red Sea. We will walk into hospitals. They will be dying for us to be there.
Yeah.
They will use our product. And they will, but like, the hardest part is after FDA clearance. You know what I mean? And I think, again,
Yes.
back to the question, like, and when you've got a mature market with really dominant players that have, embedded GPO contracts and relationships and bundled ways that they sell things, it's just really hard to go pound that pavement commercially on your own. So anyway, I think like if someone's looking for like, well, my device fits in this mold, if you're in that mold, you should really be trying and considering to like execute the playbook, or actually just call Brad because that's kind of what he does,
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, you've got the big players too, but in any of those markets, you have those, number 4, number 5, number 6 players who are looking for something interesting, but they've already developed a company. They have their distribution set up. Maybe they're not the behemoth like the number 1 or number 2, but you might have something that can fit to their portfolio that helps them compete. So for the lower, the kind of the number 5 or 6 player, you're trying to help them gain market share. For, maybe the 1 or 2, they're always looking to gain market share, but also it's preservation of what they've already built. So that's, kind of a way to look at those established markets.
Yeah, no, I like that should definitely not be discounted. I mean, there's markets like spine, right, where you've got, I think it's 8 companies control 80%, but like because of the size of the market and the size, like dollar value of one surgeon, like you can have a company that's like 1% market share or 2% market share, and it's like a 20, 30, 50 billion or $1 million company. So those like mid-tier, mid-markets, and I really mean mid-market from like a broader stock market perspective. I mean like mid-market in that like 10 to 50 million, 10 to 75 million in revenue. I think you should explore those opportunities, especially if you have some development work left to do, like where you're either like around the same point that you were with HolmesMed, you guys were with HolmesMed, or even earlier. There are a lot of those groups that are vertically integrated. They own the 510Ks, they have a manufacturing facility, they make their own products, and they have engineers. So like, if you're going to a company that's just like strictly commercial focused and they are not an engineering core competency company per se and don't do their own manufacturing, like that development work is going to be a lot scarier, and it's just a lower chance of success. They index that risk as higher, even though it's a small amount of development risk. So I think if you are looking at those mid markets, think about what are their core competencies as an organization. Are they 2% of their employees are engineers, or is it 10%? You know what I mean? Because that's, and like you said, can they plug it into a development team? Do they have a really good development team to plug it into? Right.
Yeah. That goes all the way back full circle to understanding your target. Who are you talking to? Who are you trying to strike a deal with? Understand who they are.
Yeah. And it's also just, I do have it like, want to keep going with this line of questioning and stuff, but like not just like the IP stuff that you talked about, like what's expired, what do they have? Like that's such critical information. But then like, what's their balance sheet look like? If, what's their cash flow? What statements have they made? The division leaders or operating unit people, what are they talking about? Are they talking about doing more deals, smaller deals, bigger deals? What deals have they done recently? Like acquisitions, strategic investments. What can you find? Like if you come in armed with that knowledge and then like let them know that you understand all that stuff, you're going to gain a ton of credibility in that process too.
Yeah. Yep. Of course. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Looking at all those activities and things you mentioned are critical. Yep.
Yeah. So this is another thing that I think people don't either think about or factor in because they're kind of focused on getting to the point. But like on the other side of it, right? Like post handshake, right? Like what do the next 90 days, the next 180 days or whatever look like? Are you working hand in glove? Is there some like handoff cliff and then you don't really talk to each other anymore? Like I'm curious what that looks like.
I mean, in this case, it was really simple. The deal's done. It's good. So, Dr. Holmes is going to help Arthrex. HolmesMed as an entity still exists. I wouldn't be surprised if he pops out another idea in the next 6 to 9 months because that's just what he does. But in this deal, it's really simple. The deal is done, and we're obviously extremely happy on our end. Everything went smoothly. Mm-hmm. They are off and running with HolmesMed's former assets. So simple as that. Yep. Really good. Funny things. We had to make sure we're all in different spots. So from a HolmesMed team, we've got, we had some R&D help up in Massachusetts. We've got a couple members in South Carolina. I'm in Georgia. So we had some virtual parties to celebrate what we're doing. We'll probably get together in the new year.
Speaking of virtual parties, I've got my bar cart just here off screen, slightly hidden off screen, but like if you ever want to have a virtual party, let me know. Yeah,
it was fun. Probably the funniest thing is I got to, I'm like, having this sort of deal, there should really be like one of those giant lottery check moments. We really deserve that. That doesn't happen in the real world unless you actually.
Yeah.
But I went on to Amazon and found like a $15 dry erase whiteboard check and sent it to Dr. Holmes for Christmas. I said, "Hey, here's your giant check Christmas party or Christmas present." So that was probably the coolest client gift I've ever gotten.
That's really cool.
So it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really awesome.
The biggest thing is like we're all, we got everything done and then you kind of exhale and we were all a little bit sad because it was a really great team. We're happy for the deal, right? But we enjoyed working together.
Yeah.
And again, who knows what Dr. Holmes would come up with next. Honestly, there was a little bit of sadness, that the whole journey ended. The journey itself is fun. Obviously, the deal is the culmination of everything, and it's exciting where everybody wanted to go. I kind of miss my weekly Monday morning HolmesMed team meeting.
Yeah, it's bittersweet. It's got to be. So we'll do some kind of like, semi-rapid fire, questions here towards the end and before we close it out. So curious about this from first conversation. So like that warm intro and you got in the door from first conversation to like when you guys actually like executed and signed a deal, like how long did that take for you guys?
For that one is about 6 or 7 months.
I still think that's fast, frankly,
it was. Yeah.
So I think founders out there should probably expect 9 to 12 months. Again, that's not to say like that is the entirety of your interactions with the strategic. Like that is probably going to be 2 to 3 years, right? But like from when maybe you have this like, hey, we've reached this point and we're ready to like, because the previous stuff is just like keeping tabs, maybe keeping updates once every 6 months, you just whatever. But then once it really kind of kicked off again at the end, like it's going to be 9 to 12 months usually, right? The bigger the company, the longer the timeline on that.
Yeah. And the longer time period, I started working spring, so it was probably March or April of 24, and then we got this ultimate deal done November, December of 25. So that was the full process. And yeah, I agree. It's quicker than anyone expected. Yeah.
And honestly, like, I don't think, Dr. Holmes could have like dreamed up a better outcome for you guys to do this in basically under 2 years from when you like came on to getting this signed. So kudos to you on that. But okay, next question. So, is there anything about, I guess maybe you can look at the makeup of like the HolmesMed team, but like any specific resources, when I say resources, that can be like the human capital too, right? But like what resources do early stage companies need, startups need to have in place to like really be able to, whether it's a co-development, like being co-development ready, or like asset acquisition ready, or IP license ready, like team size, maybe, funding runway potentially, but like just anything that you think like these are the building blocks they really, really need to have in place.
Yeah. So first thing I would say to that is there's a lot of really good fractional talent out there. And I think maybe since COVID period and, there's been a lot of layoffs in the medtech space, there's a lot of really good people out there that can give you some fractional support. Now you need to know who they are and where they are and how to go find them. But in our case, we had, this is my business. I do this every day with multiple clients. But we had people who were running quality and regulatory service companies, but were also advising us on the side. So we had some quality and regulatory expertise there. We had, probably the most important thing is, I'm an engineer by training, but I know my limits. We had, an R&D engineer. I knew from my connections, the kind of guy, like, this is really the guy you need. He's got his own testing lab in his basement, or he knows where to go get equipment, can do his own mechanical testing, has worked with startups. Those types of engineers are really, really critical. Knew this device and this space really well. So that was a really great piece of fractional talent for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just being creative and finding those people that can work with you and help you fractionally on a sort of contractor basis to help you move things forward. But yeah, quality, regulatory, R&D, those are obviously the big ones. But
yeah, and like as you were talking through that, I'm a very visual person, and I like in my head I was almost thinking like you've got this like nexus of like maybe it's founder or other full-time person right there at the middle, and then you've kind of got this ring of like less hours per month and like more hours per month as it goes in, and you've kind of got your quality and maybe your IP person's at the outermost ring, right? And then you've got your regulatory and quality person. And then you've got your, I would say your builder, the person that can like either machine it or 3D print it or like do those things quickly. And then you've got your mechanical engineer that should be almost at the center or at the center, right? Somebody that can really think in 3D with designs. And then and sometimes that person I think can also be the glue guy or glue girl that is the quarterback, right? That understands the relationship between each person circling around this, nucleus, right? To me, like that, like exactly what you described, that's the makeup. You need the quarterback. You need somebody that can 3D print. I'll just give a shout out to Jim Duncan, spine and orthopedics design engineer. But like, we were just talking to him the other day and it was like, talking about assembling some devices. And he's like, well, he's got a 3D printer here and he can do some other assembly here. And then down the road, he knows, so-and-so, and he can go in there if he needs to do any laser welding or like spot welding real quick. You know what I'm saying? And like, but when you have that person is really critical. That person and the engineer are really critical. And like, if you can, consolidate those, like, I feel like, you solve that engineering and quarterback for a lot of people, which like when you can have a quarterback that can like occupy more rings, it's a huge difference maker.
Yeah. And if you haven't, especially if it's a physician founder, most physician founders aren't quitting their day jobs. Some of them do, but most of them are still operating every day. You got to have someone who's thinking about your project every day to really move it forward fast, just because, again, you're operating all day. And so, so that was really a big game changer, I think, on the HolmesMed side, because then he could get home after operating on patients every day and see the progress in his email inbox, in his email inbox of things that we had done all day. So it's good.
Yeah. No, 100. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. So, so this HolmesMed product was in the like sports med soft tissue, like kind of broadly space, right? I know you've got like a really great repertoire portfolio of stuff going all the way back to like the Cook Regentech days that you've worked on, and you really can. I feel like frankly, Brad, like you could pretty much work on any med tech product or device under the sun and have success with it. But like, are there any types of devices, clinical areas, any like almost like strategic focus areas where you're like, I would like to work on, whether it's more of those, or I would love to get more into the space, or I just think this is like a hot space that I'm interested in, and because I'm always curious to see like what people think are going to be big markets, growing markets over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the variety of things I get to work on. And your question kind of alluded to it. Everything from a sports med class 2 product to I've got an injectable hydrogel product that is an IND pathway and will take 20 years to ever get to market.
Yeah.
Just started a project. So I'm probably most excited about kind of some new things. I've got a new project starting on a kind of an autism eye tracker clinical decision support tool that, I'm not a big AI guy. I know I learn everything I know in AI from you, Spencer, but it's got some components to it. So I'm really, again, that's sort of, early stage founders haven't even started a company yet, but they're looking to transition what they've done on a research side into a commercial type entity. I'm really excited to get into that because it's a little bit different and new for me. But yeah, I there's not anything specific. I look for something that has a clear pathway forward and you can see the patient impact. Those two things, you hit kind of the business commercial pathway forward, and then you've got something that can truly be impactful to patients. Those are in general the things that excite me. I wouldn't say there's anything specific. When before I took Dr. Holmes' project on, I had just finished up a tour at a sports medicine startup that folded. I swore I didn't want to work on a sports med project again for a while. And of course, that falls in my lap literally in the first 2 months of me starting my business. Really, really glad awesome. It did. But so yeah, as long as it's got a pathway and you can see some patient impacts, I like it. I love jumping from different technologies and segments. It's really fun. It keeps my day interesting. It keeps my network growing. It's kind of funny. I've got a lot of people in my network, like they've worked solely in orthopedics their entire career, or even niched down further than that, or solely in the vascular space. Somehow I'm sitting out here thinking like of all the crazy things I've had to work on. Like I don't fit in any of those clubs anymore. I'm just this general floater guy.
Dude, man after my own heart, I swear.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Well, I feel the same way though. Honestly, I'm almost more cynical these days when I look at like products and I'm like, is this good or would this excite me or whatever? I'm almost like, is this going to allow surgeons to like treat different patients, like expand their as a surgeon, like their market, the procedures they can do? Is this going to allow them to like bill or code additionally or up bill or like kind of generate more revenue, I would say broadly for those two things? And does this fit, like, I would say, like economically with the thesis of like things moving to outpatient, to surgery centers, to like faster, less invasive care at a ambulatory type site? Like I feel like those things in my head are, and I think HolmesMed honestly checks all those boxes, right? But I think in my mind, like those are the things that it's like, because I feel like at the end of the day, it's like, can you make this? Yes. Can you get it through the FDA? Probably yes. Like maybe even, is there a reimbursement pathway? Yes. But like that's just like not enough these days. Like it has to move the needle economically for the hospital and frankly for the surgeon. You know what I mean? And like time savings and stuff is a big deal. But like unless you trip a certain threshold, which may be 20 or 25 minutes per procedure, I think, then they're not doing an extra case that day. You're just giving them like a slightly longer coffee break. Yeah. So anyways, those are I'm a little bit more cynical. Yes, it should help patients, and I do care about that, but like that's kind of like my table stakes, and then that's the other stuff I really care about. But all right, so Brad, I'm so glad we did this round 2, and I just want to say huge success that you've had with this. You should be congratulated. I know you were like a driving force behind all this happening, so just like hats off to you. I hope you poured a tall glass of
Thank you.
bourbon or pop some champagne on your virtual parties because you guys deserve it. But for people that want to find you, they want to learn more about DCMS Solutions, or explore working with you on strategic partnerships and things like that, how do they find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, two best ways are LinkedIn. Very active on LinkedIn. So find me there, and then DCMSsolutions.com. Finally have a website I'm actually proud to share with people. So those two places will get you where you need to go.
I was just going to plug it. You beat me to it. The new DCMS website is awesome. It does a great breakdown of like some of the productizing stuff that Brad was talking about. He like knocked it out of the park. So go check that out and go follow him and connect with him on LinkedIn. He's always putting out really good, valuable content. It's not just like him patting himself on the back or talking takes that every single other person going to give you. It's really good, valuable stuff. I always engage with it whenever I see it. So Brad, thank you again. Whenever you help your next client get the next deal, or even sooner, we'll have to come back and do a round 3. But dude, thank you. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for being a part of XO for as long as you have. And thank you for being on the pod.
100%. Love it. Thank you.
Yep. And for everybody that stayed around for the whole pod, thank you. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.